The Citizen Mike Show. News. Commentary. Interviews. The Citizen Mike Show starts now.
Welcome to the Citizen Mike Show. I am not Mike Burdinsky. I am Christopher Shortell, Republican Town Councilor and co-host. Mike Burdinsky has been suspended without pay, but WPA, no, I'm kidding. Mike Burdinsky is on vacation, a well-deserved vacation, but he has graciously allowed me to fill in for him on this show. So I'm very excited for the opportunity. And for the special opportunity for this show, I knew I had to get a town councilor on, a town councilor who had the gravitas, the knowledge, and the experience to really dive into some key issues today. Unfortunately, Craig Fishbein wasn't available, neither was Vinnie Cervoni, but I am pleased to introduce here with me my fellow councilor and Republican, Joe Marrone.
Good evening, Chris. Happy to be third, at least.
Yeah, hey, you know
works.
what? Definitely happy to have you here. So we have a great show planned tonight. We're going to cover a bunch of topics, and we're going to start with some breaking news on the Board of Education. So I have just come from the Board of Education workshop. This is budget season. It's all kicking off right now. And so the Board of Education goes first, and they have a series of workshops in which they introduce to the public their budget request, but then the board, over the next 6 weeks or so, I guess 5 weeks, whittles down that request before it's presented to the mayor. It has to go to the mayor by March 1st. So we're not going to get too detailed here because this is going to change, but I just want to give you the number and then get your reaction. Joe Marrone is a former vice chair of the Board of Education, so Joe has a lot of experience. So the budget request for the Board of Ed, as it stands now for their sustained services budget, stands at $106,310,947. No, I'm sorry, Sal's going to kill me. It's not that. It's $107,925,228, which is a 4.31% increase. Let me read that again. About $108 million is their request. And that, just to give you some context, their budget currently is 103.4, give or take. So 4.31% increase is where they're starting for sustained services. We're not going to get into strategic because they never get strategic, really. Right. Dr. Menzo did say tonight at the meeting the drivers to that are health insurance, which is a big driver. In fact, the number I read erroneously was the number that they had before they got hit with the big health insurance increase.
So more than $1 million in just insurance increase.
Correct.
Wow.
Way more. So that is driving this. Also, the transportation contract is driving it, and salaries. So I'll stop talking. Your reaction, former Board of Ed member and vice chair.
Well, it's funny because we've gone down this road a bunch of times now, right? I was on the board for 6 years. This is our fourth year on the council, or fifth year. We're entering our fifth year on the council. So I feel like we've kind of gone down this road many times. And in the beginning, it seemed very dramatic. I think we know what's going to happen is he's going to request 4.whatever%, and then in the end, the mayor's going to give him 1.5%, and they're going to make do with it, and they're going to do great with the 1.5% that they get.
Yeah.
So I feel like, in the beginning, the sustained versus the strategic was like we really focused on that as what are the strategic goals. But now I feel like we've kind of like walked it back a little bit where they kind of know what they really need and they put it in the sustained, and the strategic is kind of like what they'd want to do if they could.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think that's a fair assessment. I mean, it's kind of like buying a car a little bit, and I don't mean that in a bad way, but yeah, you never pay what the sticker says on the car.
That's right.
So do you see anything, because you mentioned, because you were on the board for 6 years, 4 of that as vice chair.
Correct.
And if memory serves, because we were together, that's how we met. Right. The last 2 years we were together on the board. Your last 2 years was my only 2 years on the board. I think you voted against both budgets when you were on the board. So I'm not saying that in a bad way. So can you walk me through, because I don't recall anyone voting against the budget ever on the Board of Ed.
So, I voted for some and against some budgets, and I don't remember what the tallies are.
Right.
I think, if you look at it holistically, I guess if your focus is just education, then whatever, and some of the board members, their focus is just education. And there's nothing wrong with that, right? But if you're pure education, then you're in it to get whatever you can for the schools. I was a little more, I'm from town, so I'm more of a towny kind of personality. So I'm more concerned about what it's going to do to my taxes and my neighbors and so on and so forth. So, I always tried to walk the line towards, what's sustainable over the long term. Like, obviously, if we give the Board of Ed 4% this year, and then they requested 4% again next year, which they would do, you can't sustain that over any period of time because our town budget's not growing. It's not going to grow by 4% a year.
Right. No, that makes sense. You mentioned taxing. I'm going to ask you a hypothetical.
Sure.
This has come up in discussion. I mean, it comes up now and then. I don't believe it came up seriously in the charter revision a couple years back. But do you think that, would you like to see a town structure where the Board of Ed actually sets, they're the final authority on their budget versus it going to us to approve in the council? So the Board of Ed would have taxing authority on their portion?
It's funny because my wife is from Long Island. And on Long Island, most of the school districts have they set their own school tax rate, and the citizens vote on the school budget. So what happens is if you get voter turnout is not great most of the time, right?
Right.
And it tends to be older folks that vote, and I'm not, it just is what it is. So oftentimes what happens, or sometimes what happens there is when people come out to vote for it, there's something they don't like, it's too much of an increase, they vote it down regardless of what the content is. And so you can end up in a situation where now you have no school budget, and they end up on some sort of a austerity plan where you really have to trim things back, no sports, so on and so forth. So I hate to put that kind of issue in the hands of the people at large. Not that the people couldn't handle it, but you elect people to make these kinds of decisions, to study these issues, right? We spend a lot of time reading these reports, talking to town officials and so on. I don't know if you could expect members of the public to do that and be able to vote appropriately on a budget. I mean, they certainly could. It's certainly within their ability, but how many people are going to?
Okay, so you'd be against a referendum.
Absolutely.
But what about having the Board of Ed set the budget themselves, like a separate?
And then have
there is no, like right now it goes to us.
Right.
But I think it's been talked about that the Board of Ed could be the final.
Well, I know there's the talk at the state about allowing Board of Eds to be a taxing authority.
That which would greatly, what do you think about that? Do you think?
Well, I think that we have too many taxing authorities as it is. I mean, between the local, federal and state, you pay taxes on everything, taxes and fees. So now you're going to add another layer to that. And then, there's a lot of places that have fire districts. So, I mean, it's like, how many taxing authorities do you need to have?
Right.
I like sort of the one-stop shopping of having all town departments under the town. And then they can make decisions. The town council and the mayor can make decisions in terms of the whole budget.
Right. I agree with that. Last question. We're going to get off this topic because there's a lot more to this process.
Right.
We're just at the beginning, so we don't want to get too in the weeds. Last question on the Board of Ed budget. Would this increase be significantly less, or this proposed increase be significantly less if your children were not in the school district? You have like 6 kids or 7?
I have 3 kids, 3 sons,
okay.
sons.
Okay.
And they're all in the public schools. But, I think we're sort of in the game stage of because my prediction is that this will drop dramatically, but by the time this gets to the council. It always comes out with a big number. So 4.3 is where we're starting now.
4.31%.
4.31 is where we're starting now. My prediction is it'll be like 3.5 by the time it gets to the council, and then the mayor will will it down to like 1.5%.
That's the same. Yeah, same thing happens. Okay, let's switch gears.
Sure.
And let's go completely the other way, and let's talk about freedom of information.
Great topic.
So we recently were made aware by Barbara Thompson, the town clerk, of an FOI request. So by Lauren Takoris, who's the Record Journal reporter that covers the town council and covers Wallingford. Walk us through what the request was.
So the request was she wanted copies of all the email that went between the town clerk, who is essentially, as you know, the person that handles all of our correspondence. We don't have a council secretary, so she handles all of our correspondence and so on. So she wanted all of the email to include any banter or anything between the council members or the town clerk and council members. So
did you get nervous?
No, not at all.
When
because
you saw that?
There's a lot of banter that goes on, not on. I wouldn't use an official email from the town clerk as a way to present my opinion to the other council members.
Is that directed at me? No, I'm just kidding.
No, I mean, jokes are okay as long as they're appropriate. But
right.
Yeah, it doesn't matter.
No, I felt the same way. So I did talk to Lauren to get a little more info because I was curious. What. When you get these requests, sometimes you wonder, is there a specific thing they're looking for?
Right.
And it turns out that there isn't. It's really just a transparency issue, and there are a lot of examples of communications and potential stories that should be covered that fall outside our typical agendas and minutes that we get. So an example would be with the mayor and I had an exchange. We wrote letters to each other about the minutes being online.
Right.
And the way the process was before, Lauren wouldn't see that unless somebody forwarded it to her. And she actually wrote about it when it came up on this show. So that's an example where if this process were in place, she would have seen the back and forth with the mayor and me. And it was good. It wasn't bad back and forth. We were just trying to come to an agreement. So I think so she said that's where it's coming from, and that they do this in other towns. In fact, our old reporter, Lee Taus, did this in Meriden. When she moved to Meriden, this was a standard practice. And actually, the Record Journal and Lauren already do this for personnel letters, that they have a monthly FOI request with Jim Hutt. And you'll see story. I think there's a story in the paper online tonight that actually is about 2 police officers who got letters for vehicular issues. That's how that article got written, was from that request. So it's really just routine. There's no smoking gun that they're looking for anyway.
Right. I hope Lauren understands the volume of correspondence we get, because it's a lot. So
it's a lot.
She should draw a warm bath, pour a glass of wine, light some candles, and relax and read through thousands of pages of stuff.
Right, and some very witty banter from some of us, and then some very angry banter from our chairman, reminding us about the sanctity of FOI.
Yes,
So
yes.
this is really just something to kind of cover. So let's move on to another topic that's near and dear to our hearts, and it's a topic that's coming up, the Town Council Rules of Procedure.
Okay.
So to set this up for our audience, the Town Council has operating rules of procedure that govern exactly how we operate every term. And they're typically at the beginning of each term, every 2 years. They are brought up early on, right around now, and the council looks at them. Sometimes nothing changes, sometimes things do change. And this relates to everything from how things can be pulled, the timing for pulling something off the consent agenda, or public comment, which has been the big one that had some headlines. So along those lines, you and I, when we first got on the council 4 years ago, we were part of, I think, significant change with the public comment. Do you want to talk about that?
Sure. So, to put this the most polite way that I can, there was a lot of seasoned town council members. And so they had been accustomed to a general group of the public that would come to the meetings and speak. And so I think the attitude was more or less like, we've heard what they have to say, we're all set. And so when I got on the council, my sense was, you asked for this job, you got the job, so now you have to listen to what the public wants to say. So, even if it's the same people and they bring up the same points at every meeting, it's a public meeting. To me, the public has a right to speak at the meeting. So that's why I presented the motion at that meeting to allow additional public comment. And
let's get specific. So, specifically what happened before, 2 years before, the council in 2014 restricted public comment only to motions that had an action associated. Right. So our motions typically, you will see possible action on, and that's a motion. You'll also see, or you'll see discussion and possible action, or you'll see discussion only if it's simply. And so what they did was I think we weren't on the count. The thought process was, if there's going to be a vote and there's going to be an action, public can comment.
Right.
But discussion, they took it off of anything with discussion. And to be fair, I don't know how many true discussion items get put on agendas.
Agreed.
Not a lot.
Agreed.
I think that was so. Anyway, so they did that in 2014. We got on the council along with, I think Jason Zandri was coming back on. He'd run for mayor.
I think so. Yeah.
He'd run for mayor, so he was off for 2. So that there were 3 new. Jason wasn't new to the council. He was new. He was coming back, and then you and I were new.
Right.
We were the 3 new members of that council, and then the motion you presented was to basically undo that last motion and have public comment on any agenda item.
Right.
And we had some discussion. It passed unanimously.
I think it did. After serious discussion, it did pass unanimously.
It did pass unanimously. So that's where, and I think that was a good thing. I agreed with you on it.
I think it was a good thing too. I think we could take it keep going in that direction. I mean, to me, the freer, the more transparent government is, the better. And so, allowing the public to speak at these meetings, a lot of these decisions are made. As you know, a lot of these decisions aren't made at the time you vote for them. Government moves very slowly. So a lot of these things are brought up multiple times. You talk about them at different times. So you can't expect members of the public to come to every meeting.
Right.
And especially if you have an item You think like the operations committee. If you had an item coming before, not operations, that's Board of Ed.
Right.
The ordinance committee.
Right.
If you had an item coming up before the ordinance committee, everything takes 3 or 4 meetings before we come
Right.
before it passes essentially.
Right.
So you can't expect people to go to 3 ordinance committee meetings and then go to the full council meeting. You know, a lot of times when it gets to the full council meeting and then they would have an opportunity to talk about it, it's kind of
So
the decision's been made.
so there would be if I'm hearing you correctly, there is no topic the council could discuss that you would have an issue with the public commenting on.
No topic except for something, say, that would be protected by FOI as being a private meeting. Things like
Right.
negotiation strategy and
Okay.
things of that nature. But other than
Right.
that, I would have no issue with the public commenting on any topic.
So currently we have workshops,
Right.
and workshops were excluded.
Right.
When you made the motion, which I seconded 4 years ago, workshops were not part of that. Workshops continue to be
Right.
to exclude public. Public can go, public can watch, they can't comment. So
Right.
you would potentially expand it
So, yeah, I mean,
to in a workshop
and
setting.
when we look at how many workshops we have, there's the budget, where we have a series of workshops. And outside of the budget, it's very infrequent.
Well, it's ironic. It's this one. This is going to be a workshop. The town
Right, this will be a
council rules
workshop.
will be
Right.
a workshop where we'll discuss public comment.
Right.
And the public can't
The public
comment.
can't comment.
Right.
So,
Right.
and then they could go. So we can't, in defense of the council leadership, we're not going to vote on this at this minutes meeting. We'll come up with sort of a draft, and then it comes
Right.
back to the full council meeting for us to vote on.
Right.
But yeah, I don't see any reason why the public couldn't comment. This is so infrequent. Even on the budget hearings, we save the public comment. We have one day essentially public comment, and then when we vote on the budget, the public can comment. But it kind of seems like as the departments come up and present their budgets, the way it's structured now is the public can come up and ask a question of any department head in one night. So you haven't heard the presentations from the departments yet. So you need to know what your question is going to be before they've delivered their address in
Right.
terms of what they're going to do. So it
Yeah.
seems kind of backward. Ask your question before you know what they have to say, and so on and so forth.
It's I agree with you that budget process is very fragmented. I think we're required by charter to have the first public hearing
Right.
within a certain number of days of the
Right.
public of April 1st, and then you're right. And then we have our workshops. We ask our questions. Certainly, if I was sitting out there listening to a question that Craig might ask, or Tom Laffin might ask, or Vinny Testa, I may, as a member of the public, think, "Oh, I never thought of that.
Right.
I have another question. Oh, and by the way, I'm an educator, so I know more about that. I can even ask a question that they're not going to think of, or I'm a
Sure.
firefighter,
Right.
Or and so I think you're right. I think that it makes our meetings longer, but like you said, we signed up for this job.
Right, that's exactly it.
I mean, I agree with you. I'm trying to interview you objectively,
No,
but I
that's
agree
fine.
with you 1,000%
Well,
on
it's
this.
like, how do you,
yeah.
how do you work for the public and then tell the public they can't talk to you about the issue in the official forum in which
Right.
you're going to make the decision?
And I think that it's, look, it's the elephant in the room. You mentioned it at the outset of this topic. It's the same 3 or 4 people
Right.
who go to meetings, and I wonder if they were telling us how awesome we were every 2 weeks, if they were telling the mayor what a great job he was doing,
Right.
and if they were telling the Republican majority, probably they didn't vote for any of us. At least the 6 of us,
Right.
maybe except for Christina, because everyone voted.
Whom everyone voted for.
That's my Christina Tata shout out for the show. I wonder if this would be viewed differently by some counselors, and I feel like you have to look at things in the abstract. You can't look at things the way they are. Someday we could be the ones sitting out there. Someday there could be a Democrat council with a Democrat mayor, and I don't know. Would we be happy not being able to walk up to that mic and comment?
Right.
In that scenario, I don't think we would, but we never think about it that way. I don't
Right.
think. Do you?
No, I think you're probably right. I think that we've been the party in power now for some time, and I think that it breeds a little bit of complacency at times. And
Yeah.
so I know it's the same people that come up to talk all the time, but sometimes, I don't want to mention names, but there's a certain individual that comes to pretty much every meeting and has something to say, and he's off a lot, but the times he's on, he's really on. So it's kind of
Right.
like, I'm willing to weed through all the chaff to get to the wheat in the middle.
Right. And I think the other thing to point out is there are rules around the length of public comment
Right.
and number of questions, which are largely not enforced today.
Correct.
So I would say if we do expand it to workshop, enforce the rules. The rules are in there.
I'd be willing to have a timer that the public could see, and when
Yeah.
the timer's up, they cut your mic or whatever.
Right. So that's public comment. So we'll see. We'll see what happens. We have the workshop. The workshop is February 11th, I think. So it's after our regular council meeting. So our next council meeting is that same night. We kind of have a longer gap between meetings because of the way the calendar fell, and then, like as you said, we will the outcome of that workshop will then be voted upon at the February 25th council meeting,
Right.
and we'll see what happens.
So if you're a member of the public and you want input into our council rules,
Yeah.
come to the meeting
Just stare at us.
beforehand. Come to the meeting beforehand
yeah.
and talk at the public comment there.
That's
'Cause
right.
You're not going to get an opportunity later.
That's right. That's great. Are there any other outside of public comment? Are there any other rules, that you think are controversial or would be looked at?
Nothing controversial, but I think our budget process is kind of a hot mess.
Okay.
And some of that's in the charter, so we have to follow what the charter says. But I think some of it is just set sort of by precedent and by council rules. Our attendance in 2019, I would say, was pretty poor for the most of the budget conferences or budget workshops. So I think, if the council people aren't involved in it, maybe we don't need to have as many meetings, or I guess I'm not sure why. I went to pretty much all the meetings except
When
for
you
the ones
say
I was
our
out of town.
attendance, you mean the town council?
I mean the town council
Oh,
attendance.
okay, not the public's
Not the
attendance.
public attendance,
The town
no.
council attendance. Okay.
No, and the public doesn't come to a lot of council. I mean, you don't get a lot of public at any
Right.
council meetings, quite
Right.
frankly. But the town council attendance was awful. So there was a lot of rooms where there would be, just the Republicans or even not a quorum of Republicans there.
Yeah.
For the meeting. So I'd like to get to the bottom of why it is that people don't go, and it could just be schedules, but maybe it's because there's no topics that they're interested in. And if that's the case, maybe there's a way we could streamline this and not go through all of these meetings.
But you just said before that we want to let the public comment at those same meetings.
Right.
So would that be potentially a conflict where, if you streamline the meetings,
Right.
or you're just saying add more fewer dates is what you're saying, right? Or,
Fewer dates, and so the other thing is, how the budget process works now is, as you know, if the council has no questions for that particular department, they don't appear before the
Right,
council.
right.
So if the public had a question for that department, they have to ask it in the first meeting, or they get no chance at
Right.
all. So I just feel like there should be a better way. I mean, do you need to have a town meeting to do it? I mean, would there be a way to put questions on like an online forum and let the department heads? Yeah,
what did you just online?
There's this thing called the interweb where. I mean, I don't want to. I don't want to.
We have to
The town to
censor that.
explode.
A big censor just went across the screen. We're not. Can I tell you? So can I tell a story? I don't know if
Sure.
I don't know if you know this story. So I've been involved for this is year 7 for me. So you've been involved a lot longer than I have. 2 years on the board, 4 on the council, year 5 on the council. I've gotten a call from the mayor one time. Of all the stuff I've ever said, I mean, I've said some stuff up there. I'm not
Yep.
Craig. I'm not you or Craig, but I've said
Right.
stuff that's been,
I'm very rarely controversial.
with the salt. With the salt, I don't know.
Continue.
One time I got a call from them. It wasn't on the
Okay.
HSA stuff. It wasn't, you know what it was on? When I was pushing a year ago I kept complaining that we spend all this money on the public notices of the budget in the newspaper. And I said, why can't we just put it online? More people go online. We had a big back and forth about it. And the mayor called me. And, you see the number and you're like, why? What? I know the number, 294-2040, I think is the number. And I'm like, I don't know why. And that he was very adamant that people read the paper and that we couldn't, that's some people only read the paper. And you know what? It's that in the news, that's come up at the state level.
Right.
And the state is considered putting in something to ensure that local papers keep printing that notification because it's come up in other towns. So the mayor ended up being right.
Well,
I mean,
the mayor's right from the perspective of
he
the
ended up
the
being
state
validated.
agrees.
Well, I'm saying ended up being validated by subsequent events, but it was just interesting to me. You mentioned online,
Right.
That he didn't want to.
And in defense of technology, being validated by, the state with whom he has an issue most of the time. So
Well, the state,
there's some irony there.
I know we use the state when we want to use the state as a
Right.
positive example. We do, but then we whip them the rest of the time.
Correct.
Yeah, no, that's a fair point. All right, we've really kicked these rules to death. If Mike Rudinsky's watching, he's like, guys,
Why are
should
you talking
have
about
moved
this?
on like 10 minutes ago from the council rules. I think that it'll be interesting to see what happens. Maybe nothing will
too.
happen. Maybe nothing.
Entirely possible.
Okay, so let's just stay on the council here. We had a meeting last night, and two big events happened at last night's meeting. 3 big events. I'm sorry, 3 events happened at last night's meeting. So the first one, we recognized the Wallingford girls softball
Yep.
team for winning the championship.
State championships.
State
That's a
championships.
big deal.
That was awesome, and that's what makes me love being a counselor. When you're able to, when you see those kids, you see the parents, and the mayor does such a great job.
He really does.
I mean, the mayor, we tease the mayor. We like, we like to get our little shots in about technology and stuff. But the mayor does such a wonderful job on all of that, on that type of thing. I I'm going to pivot 1 minute. Martin Luther King Day ceremony. I thought the mayor was phenomenal.
Yeah, he did.
We were both there.
He did a fantastic job. He had a great speech, and it was a good program.
It was a good program. So anyways, the mayor has been a good week in terms of seeing the mayor as the MC of the town.
Yes.
So that was one big event.
Yep.
The second big event we're going to talk about, which is we passed a bid waiver, which is a favorite of some of us, for the police to buy bulletproof vests.
Right.
Do you know what the third event, though, was?
No.
John Letourneau was sworn in as a constable.
That's right.
So, John Letourneau, if you're watching the show, I just want to get this in before we lose our train of thought, that we are dedicating this show of the Citizen Mike Show, this historic Citizen Mike Show with Chris Shortell as the host and Joe Marrone as the guest. We have dedicated it to you. And you probably knew that, John, when you saw the backdrop, the picture behind us of the Quinnipiac Linear Trail, which we know is near and dear to your heart. I actually sent my wife out yesterday. My wife's a photographer, and I didn't send that. Let me clarify. I respectfully asked her if she would not mind to go out and take some pictures, and she graciously agreed to take some pictures around town that we could. I didn't want to use the town hall.
I think the Quinnipiac River Trail is great. I run on the trail sometimes, and it's
okay.
It is a great trail. So if you don't use it because it costs us a lot of money. So
right.
So make use of it, please.
So I didn't tell her where to go. So she comes back with 100 pictures, and so I'm flipping through them. And I saw that one, and I'm like, well, that's going to be one of the finalists. And Bruce Haig in the booth helped us determine. He didn't even know about the John Letourneau connection, but he picked that, too, as the best one. And I said, we're going with that one. Okay, so bid waivers.
Yes.
We passed. There was a bid waiver proposed by the police chief that he wanted to get some new updated police vests. They have a limited shelf life. And he was able to get, just to simplify it, he's able to get funding from a regional state fund and split that with Cheshire. But then he really wanted to get the rest of the vests he needed to have consistency, have all new vests from the same manufacturer at the same time. And so he was seeking to waive the bid process. The bid process at $7,500, I believe, is the dollar amount.
I think so, yeah.
So it's an ordinance. And in the ordinance, it basically says if you're going to buy something greater than that amount, even by a penny, you have to go through a formal process with RFPs, 3 bidders. There's a scoring process. It's designed to make sure that government is being transparent. So that's the bid waiver process. The bid waiver was on the consent agenda. Mm-hmm. So I pulled it off consent. Do you want to talk about that at all, or should I just keep going?
No, well, we can talk about the consent agenda has been sort of a hot topic.
Yeah.
For some of us, because you sort of wonder sometimes how things get on the consent agenda. And it's really, between the chairman and the mayor at their agenda meeting, they kind of decide what's consent and what isn't.
Right.
And generally, I think they have excellent judgment with it. It's just sometimes you see the dollar amount of items, like the police vest, for example, and it makes you ask some questions.
Right. Right. And I think that's exactly. It's the chairman, Vinnie Cervoni, our good friend, and the mayor go through the agenda. And I think that 99% of what's on consent, I think we're usually fine with.
Absolutely.
And every so often there'll be something in there that we'll pull off. I pulled this one off. I was on the fence, and I emailed to Chief Wright, and he answered some questions. And as I said last night, my view is if it's 1 penny over the bid waiver limit, it should never be on consent. Mm-hmm. And I thought that actually it was Chairman Cervoni who I thought he asked excellent questions.
He did.
That really questions the public. I'm glad the public got to hear. Mm-hmm. The chief answered them well. I thought it was a great moment. And to me, it was just the thing that I guess I object to a little bit is I had to be the bad guy to pull it off consent.
Right.
Not that I was the bad guy, but someone always has to be it's like one of us has to pull it off consent.
Sure.
So I wish it wasn't on consent, but no one cared. I mean, no one cared who. It was all very respectful. So the bid waiver ended up passing unanimously. You voted for it. I voted for it. Everyone voted for it.
Once the police chief explained the rationale and where the money was coming from and why he wanted to get all the same vests from the same vendor, it made perfect sense to do it.
Right.
I think my only issue is just I trust the police chief, 100%. I trust most of the department heads. I shouldn't say most. I trust all the department.
Wait, Joe, who don't you trust? What department head?
No, I trust the department heads. They've always given us great info, and anytime I've asked a question, they've given me a great answer. But I think when you start to, allow them to make these kinds of decisions without view of the public, I think that's where you as a councilman start to fall into trouble, because you could end up in a situation where it's not a good decision, or it's not an honest decision, and you would never know about it.
So let me piggyback off this, because I want to talk about this a little bit more, because I had sent a letter to the mayor about this topic. So we get hit with bid waivers. I don't think it's that often throughout the year. I don't have a number right now, which Mike told me I had to have the number before the show. So sorry, Mike. It was a tough week at work.
That's what you get for taking the week off, Mike.
I know. No, this is my last show on the Citizen Mike show. But we get hit in the council with a series of bid waivers in May. So what happens is at our May, for the viewers out there, our budget is voted upon the first meeting in May, the first Tuesday in May, or the second Tuesday in May. And so, well, sorry about that. And we get a series of bid waivers that are sort of procedural and they're kind of generic more, and they're things. And so I would like more time to look at those. Those are all on consent. Every department kind of fills a list out. The Board of Ed does it. So it's different things like Attorney Fozzie,
right?
Who's he's the bonding attorney.
Bonding attorney, yeah.
You know, we don't put that out to bid. We cite and they cite a rationale, familiarity with our contracts and
right.
our finances and so forth. And there are in excess of 80. I mean, that's a number I can share. There are over 80
right.
specific individual waivers that we approve. So I had asked the mayor, can we have any more time on that? And he agreed. So he proposed pushing it off 2 weeks. And I haven't responded yet because I'm still kind of digging through, but I appreciate the response. And I think that's where I would like to see us have more time. But I also think to tie back to your budget hearing concept, I think that's where we need to start discussing. If the departments don't know if they're going to do it going forward, they're operating right now under those bid waivers.
Right.
We can certainly ask them, okay, you asked for these 6 bid waivers last May 14th.
Right.
How's that going? You going to ask for them again? So that's something I'm sort of thinking we could work into the budget as part of our budget process. What do you think? Is that fair?
I think that makes perfect sense. I feel like year after year, a lot of the bid waivers are kind of the same things. So at some point, it shouldn't really be a bid waiver. It should just be part of your budget. You should budget
right.
for these things. So if you want to pick this particular vendor, why isn't that not just part of your budget proposal, and then we can approve it then?
Right. Interesting. We'll see what happens with that. And I have to catalog 2018 because I want to validate that
right.
very hypothesis. Are these I think they are the same too, just
right.
remembering the different ones I looked at. But I think it's, again, I know that Mike has talked about, I think it's the town auditors that do the CAFR, that when he was on the council, the council pushed to have that out to bid, and there was some resistance. But then, lo and behold, they changed auditors, and everyone loves the new auditor. So I think that it's not always the worst thing. Okay.
Well, that's part of government, right? Is you like the people you like, and you've had them for a long time, and so they're like friends of yours. When I started on the Board of Education, we had the same law firm to represent the Board of Ed for years and years, and we had a new regime, and they put it out to bid, and we found someone else
who's now been there for
a long
years
time.
and years.
But
right.
we liked them much better, when they came in. So it's
that's how you find that out.
That's how you find out. Correct.
It's the process. Trust the process.
Right.
It's there for a reason. Right. Totally agree. All right. Let's move on to something even more exciting. If you like bid waivers, you're going to love this next topic. This next topic is the CAFR, the Comprehensive Annual Financial Report for the town of Wallingford. So these are the audited numbers that come in. We get this, it's a holiday gift that keeps on giving. We get it typically, right around the new year. Between
right.
Christmas and New Year's, it comes out. They spend a lot of time working on it. The fiscal year has closed over the summer. June 30th, it closed. July 1's the new fiscal year. But we're not going to Mike is going to cover this for the next 80 episodes in depth. So I'm not going to get too into it today. I don't want to steal Mike's thunder, but we had an article, January 7th, Lauren Tecoris wrote an article in the Record Journal about the CAFR, and I want to one part of the article I want to call out to you, and then I'll turn it over to you. So in the article written by Lauren, she writes, although the general fund budgetary actual results showed a surplus of $30,000, and the GAAP method, generally accepted accounting practices, the GAAP method found a deficit in the general fund of $140,000. Comptroller Jim Bowes said that with a budget as large as Wallingford's, which is $169.1 million for the current fiscal year, quote, we finished this year pretty close between the actual revenues and the actual expenditures, no matter which way you look at it, close quote. Joe Marrone, which way do you look at it?
Well, I mean, I guess if you look at the numbers, revenues versus expenditures, they're really close, right?
Yeah.
Across the board. I guess the issue is, we had a total of $6 million that was spent from the 18 budget or to go into the 19 budget. So we're paying forward money from this budget. So we're counting that as revenue in the new budget. And then it filters into all these accounts where it gets spent or not, doesn't get spent. Then at the end of the year, a lot of this money is going to come back. And we're going to spend this forward to the next budget. So it's kind of like, you could kind of have the surplus or the deficit be whatever you wanted within that $6 million by spending or not spending that money. Now, obviously, you couldn't do that year after year because you'd end up in a huge deficit.
Right.
But there's a lot of room to pad it. So at the end of the day, it's great that we're close, but I'm not sure how valuable, that the deficit or surplus number is because, again, so much of this has been sort of washed through from year after year.
Right.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does make sense. I'll tell you, I'll answer the question. I thought we had a deficit. I look at the general fund balance. I look at this, and it went down by 140,000, which to me, and I think, let me clarify. I think we had a great year. I think to cut it that, I think I agree with Jim Bose that it's in a budget that size to whittle it that close that was our deficit. I think you couldn't ask for much. You don't. I think in government you don't want a deficit spend,
right?
And you don't want to have a huge. We had some huge surpluses in past, not the last 2 years, but going before that. $2 million, $3 million.
Right, but let's keep in mind though that we have, I can't remember if it's $4 million or somewhere is like encumbered funds where the money's been earmarked for
I think
something.
it's
$6 million.
Yeah.
All right, and maybe I said $6 million before. Maybe my number was off. But
I think you're right.
Okay, so there's $6 million in encumbered funds, meaning that the council has budgeted something like road construction or whatever, and we haven't done the work yet.
Right.
Because we haven't been able, didn't have the time or whatever. So if you look at that, if they were to complete all the work in 1 year, our fund balance would drop by that amount of money, by $6 million potentially, and then we would say we have a $6 million deficit, but we don't because it's
I see your
a portion
point.
of the fund balance is money that's that's already been allocated for something.
Right. So that brings us to the one graphic I have, the one visual that I have for this show. So I've always wanted to say this. Bruce, could you put up the visual? I don't even know what I called it. All right, that one. Right. Thank you. So to your point, Joe, I think the place you look to because I just pointed to the general fund balance, the 26.1 million, and that is the unassigned. Up on the screen is the unassigned.
Right.
So most of this is used for the credit rating, the bond rating.
Right.
Most of it but that is a strategic decision or tactical. That's a decision. That's a choice.
Right. Correct.
They use that for the bond rating, and our bond rating still went down.
Right.
And now, granted, we ran, but if you look though, we've whittled this number. This unassigned balance has come down, and these numbers were validated by Jim Bose, so these are good numbers, but it's definitely come down 16.785. So maybe $1 million and change of that is the loose change that you could spend if you had to, and still keep the 10% for the bond rating. But I just think it's an interesting. That's the one I look at, and that is. And good news, bad news. I think it's good news that in the state we're in the economy we're in, the fact that we have that much money is a good thing.
I think so too. I mean, our state government's clearly in the toilet. Right?
Yeah.
So I think the fact that Wallingford's kind of holding firm, I think, is a great sign.
We could take that down. Thank you, Bruce, for that. But I also think it's you see that number drop. It's been dropping.
Right.
It's not getting higher, which will please some people. Some people will want to spend it down.
Right.
So it's one of those things. But that's the number I like to look at.
I mean, and I spent a lot of time, kind of ripping the budget process and the administration. But I mean, all factors considered, the reason we are where we are in terms of the keeping these funds in reserve is the way the mayor slowly stair steps up the mill rate. And there's no large increases. We don't skip increases in a year. Every year we get a small increase, but we keep pace with what we need to spend. So I think to his credit, he certainly has a handle on what he's doing.
Absolutely. And if you serve on the council or in anywhere, but you see it on the council, you see it if you look at our document, our minutes and our the budget transfers, everyone has their hand out to the mayor.
Oh, absolutely.
Everyone is coming to him with a want and a need. I mean, I can't imagine, the Board of Ed meeting earlier tonight, we get to see all that because it's the Board of Ed.
Right.
And the mayor has to go through that in every department, in private because they all report to him. But I mean, everyone's got something that they need to fund, and the buck has to stop with him.
Absolutely does.
So it's not an enviable position.
No, it isn't. And he's, to be quite frank, he's been very generous with education.
Oh, very much.
And not just in the regular budget, but in terms of the
capital
CRA
improvement
funds and all that.
The CRA funds.
Yeah.
Yes. I actually have that. I have that number. We have spent just to go through that the CRRA distribution fund, special revenue. We've spent 1.65 million dollars since 2014 on capital on the Board of Ed on facilities and capital improvement. That's not counting other capital improvements where we've spent almost 13 million. We've spent 8 million. We have 5 million authorized more. So you're right. He's been very, very generous with education. So I totally agree. So again, that is our quick take on the CAFR. If you want to learn more about the CAFR, watch the Citizen Mike show, because I know Mike's going to, what was the one year the mayor wrote the cover memo that Mike went through the roof? The mayor said I forget what happened. It was like 3 years ago. Mike spent like 5 shows on it. So, I mean, I think Mike's okay with this, but we'll see. Mike shares some of your concerns about the money that filters in and out.
Right.
It's the dead money,
right.
He calls it. So I think Mike's going to address that. So, all right. So now, I'm going to add a topic I didn't prep you for.
Okay.
It's before we get to rapid fire.
Okay.
Just because we have a little time, and I just want to, while we're still in the month of January, I thought that the swearing-in ceremony was a lot of fun.
Okay.
And I just wanted to get your impression. How did you think the swearing-in ceremony went? There's a reason I'm asking this, but
okay. I mean, I think it's a nice event.
Yeah.
It's nice to see see the board members. I thought the nominations were funny. Craig sang a song, which was kind of fun.
Yeah, definitely.
And so it was a good night. It was a fun night.
I thought it was a great night. I heard a lot of positives. People
Yep.
actually coming up to me, and I'm not going to use names, but there were 2 negative comments that I heard.
Okay.
One person said that my nomination of Tom Laffin took too long, but that was my wife.
Okay.
So we don't count that.
Right.
Somebody else who I'm not going to name said, "Oh, I didn't know we're on Comedy Central." And all I'm going to say to that is elections have consequences. So, I thought it was a great night, and I think it was great for people to see a different side, like to Craig Fishbein.
Oh, great.
Craig Fishbein. So if you don't know what we're talking about, the town officials, to the viewers out there, the town officials are sworn in the first Monday in January per the charter, and it's usually a great event. Was it the Lyman Hall band was there? Was it Sheehan? I don't want to say the wrong school because one was at Martin Luther King Day.
Yes, Martin Luther King was Lyman Hall.
So
and Sheehan was at the swearing in.
So it's a great event though, and where we nominate. The mayor actually runs the council meeting.
Right.
Then the chairman is nominated. So Craig Fishbein actually sang 2 songs.
Right.
2 songs in his nomination of Vinnie Cervoni. So very much get that feeling you get like when you would see Bill Clinton and George Bush fundraising together.
Right.
Like,
sure.
Wow, so it was nice. That was a nice moment.
Well, and just to be clear about what you're talking about, because there's been tension between Craig Fishbein and Vinnie Cervoni in the past.
Yes.
So to see Craig nominating Vinnie is sort of like the ultimate olive branch, right? Because we've accepted, that Vinnie is what he is and Craig is what he is, and so I think it was a nice moment.
And now they're best friends. It's amazing. So. And then Tom Laffin gave an excellent Tom Laffin, Vice Chair Laffin, before he was vice chair, because at that moment he was not the vice chair yet.
Right.
Seconded Craig's nomination.
Right.
And Tom Laffin, of all people, in his nomination of Cervoni, referenced the fact Vinnie Cervoni is a very good singer.
Yes.
And has been in several local bands.
Yes.
If you've seen him, he played at Celebrate Wallingford. He's an amazing singer.
He's an accomplished musician.
He's an accomplished guitarist, and.
Yep.
Tom made what did his comment? His comment was something like, I'm honored to nominate a leader who actually can sing.
Yes.
And then Tom stopped and looked right at the mayor.
Yes.
I just thought that was, of all people, Tom Laffin.
So quick story, if you have time for this.
We have time.
The mayor sang at a high school graduation, and when I was the vice chair of the Board of Ed, then I would come up after the mayor to talk.
Yeah.
So I got up to the mic and made a joke about the mayor not being able to sing. A few people cheered, but I got at least a dozen boos.
Oh, you don't joke about that.
You don't joke about the mayor singing at graduation.
No,
So it was.
So for Tom to do it.
Right.
But Tom got some laughs.
Yeah, he did.
I felt like he got laughs.
It was a very witty moment.
It was. So my only, look, it was a great feel-good moment. So I would say that the ceremony is on YouTube. It was January 6th. It's a January 6th special meeting. Or no, it wasn't. The special meeting was the one after, I guess. It's labeled the swearing in. So if you go on YouTube, definitely, it's not that long. Check it out. Check out the nominations. You nominated Tom Laffin. I nominated him. You seconded that.
Right.
We both were really funny. I'm just going to say it.
I think you.
We
you
killed
were funny.
it.
You were funny, but it worked out good.
Yeah, it worked out great. It was a really good night where we, especially in what will likely, coming off an election, it's nice to have that night.
Yes.
And so, yeah, we're on Comedy Central. Elections have
Well,
consequences.
the thing is,
I'm just having fun with that comment.
yeah, I know, and you need to, everything can't be super serious all the time. I mean,
No.
a lot of the topics we talk about are really serious. We're talking about, people's jobs and,
sure.
and crime and all these things. So, I
Sure.
mean, it's one night where there's nothing serious on the agenda. So I think it's all right to have some fun with it.
We're going to get to rapid fire. I'm just going to keep throwing stuff that I didn't put on our.
All right, fire
prep,
away. I'm ready.
Just because you mentioned crime, and I
Yes.
guess so. So my question is do you have any as we head into this budget cycle as a counselor, do you have any kind of priority or hot issue? Let's just pick one that you're going to be focused on, or maybe not. Maybe you just I don't know.
If I had to pick one issue, I think it's maybe containing the entire. But my concern is more about containing the entire budget, containing the growth, and then the other thing is I think shifting some of what we seek in negotiation with the unions has more to do with salary than with benefits. And I think as the health insurance is really starting to clobber us, I think we need to start shifting our focus.
Yeah, it is clobbering us. Okay. We are now going to head into the final segment of our show, which is a segment that we don't typically do on Citizen Mike. Well, Mike does what he calls rapid fire, but it's not rapid. So I'm so off this show after this episode. So I'm going to do rapid fire. Joe Marrone has not been prepped on these questions. So Joe, are you ready?
Go.
All right.
Fire away.
Okay. One high school, yes or no?
No. Never.
This is great. Who's going to win the Super Bowl?
I think it's going to be the Chiefs.
Incorrect. If you had to pick one person currently on the town council who would be the next mayor?
Christina Tata. No, I'm just kidding. I can't. There's no answer I can give to that that's not going to upset somebody. So I'm going to stick with Christina Tata.
I was going to say, well, if you revoke your Christina Tata vote, then she'll be upset.
Right,
So you've already
right.
you're, okay. All right. I just realized I wrote the same question twice. That's why my rapid fire is rapidly disintegrating here. Okay, better. This is a good one. Better form of local government.
Okay.
Town manager or elected mayor?
Oh man, that's a hard question.
That's a hard question.
It is a hard question.
I don't think that's a hard question for some. Okay.
I'll go with town manager.
Town manager. Oh, this is awesome. Favorite department head?
Oh, favorite department head? Probably Chief Wright.
Yeah, Chief Wright's
He's
awesome.
such a good dude, and he's so easygoing. You can ask him anything.
Chief Wright's awesome. Does Trump get reelected?
Oh, absolutely.
You picked one high school. On a scale of 1 to 10, rate the rise of Skywalker.
I would give it a 4. I thought it was the weakest of all the newest movies.
All right. Yeah, I'd give it a 1. I thought it was like the word. I'd rather.
I don't know. Han Solo coming back, it made no sense. There was a lot of parts of it that were cheesy.
That was the one scene I liked, was Han Solo. I'll tell you the one
It was
scene.
great to see Harrison Ford, but at the same time, so he came up in Kylo Ren's dreams. Like, that didn't make any sense.
Right. Well, because he's not a Force ghost, so he doesn't have the Force.
So they did the same
yeah.
thing, but they just called it something else.
There was the scene with Chewbacca, and look, spoiler alert, if you haven't seen Star Wars The Rise of Skywalker, well, just don't see it. Go watch something else. Watch one of the...
Go watch episode 4.
You're right,
And
watch
be
episode
entertained.
4. The scene where Chewbacca dies, about an hour in,
Yes.
I sat up, and I was like, now it's getting good.
Right.
And then they walked it back 5 minutes later, and Chewbacca's alive.
One of everyone's favorite characters.
Right. All right, designated hitter, yes or no?
I would say yes.
Yeah, I'm torn on that one.
That's a tough one for me.
Yeah, me too. I think there are players out there who I'm a Atlanta Braves fan, and Dale Murphy, who played when I was a kid, that's my favorite player. His career would have been extended a lot longer had there been a DH.
Right.
He might be in the Hall of Fame right now if he could have padded his numbers a little bit. So yeah.
Well, I'm a Sox fan. Big Papi probably wouldn't have played as long if he had to play the field all the time.
Right.
With his feet, the issues with his feet. So you never know.
Most recent book you have read and/or are reading?
Oh, I'm reading Graham Greene, and the book is the one with the whiskey priest. Power and the Glory.
Power and the Glory. Wow.
Yeah.
Okay. Very literary choice.
I'm in this classic literature phase now, so
Okay.
it is what it is.
Joe Marrone is one of the more cultured counselors. You wouldn't think that. You wouldn't think that.
So.
Yeah, no. I am reading Presidents at War by Michael Beschloss, which came out about a year and a half ago. And what he does is he chronicles just different wars. And the thesis of his book, or the premise of his book, is that Congress has really abdicated, the war making. They're the ones supposed to declare war. But he traces it back to the War of 1812. That even as far back as then, presidents were sort of maneuvering Congress and kind of taking on more than what was intended by the founding.
Right.
He doesn't. I've only gotten about a third into the book, so I'm not that far in. But I read it. He doesn't get into like the war on terror. Like he doesn't. He thinks that's too soon to analyze. But it's interesting. I guess I bring it back to Wallingford, just in the sense that the concept that the executive branch, whether you agree with it or not, has kind of taken powers ceded by the legislative branch. In this book about who can declare war, on the council we have a strong form of government, but we have a council that does have power. Mike would argue the council has maybe ceded some of its power over the years.
I would agree with Mike. I think that the council ceded a lot of its power away. When it comes to the budget, we vote on the budget, but ultimately, if we vote no, the mayor gets his budget anyway. So unless we can come up with our own budget.
Right. But is that on us because we can't cobble together 7 people to agree?
I mean, that's a fair point.
If we could figure out, that would be the only way.
Yeah.
But you're right. I see your point. Okay, last rapid fire question. Your favorite kid? Who do you love the most?
I like them all equally. I'm going to go with Zach.
All right.
Who is Mr. Shortell?
He's one of my sons. All right. Joe Marrone, it has been an honor.
It's been a pleasure being here.
To have you on the show. Thank you for being on the show. If you've watched this far, thank you, because I'm grateful. Mike, I hope you haven't watched this far, but I want to thank Bruce Haig in the booth. I want to thank Susan Huizinga, the executive director of WPAA. Citizen Mike is on at 9 at night on WPAA, so this episode is being recorded Wednesday night, the 22nd. Is that where we are today? 22nd or 21st? So it'll air Thursday at 9, and every day after that at 9. I say I have DirecTV, so I don't get WPAA. Sorry, Susan. So that's why I don't know that. But I do get YouTube. And you can catch this episode on YouTube. You can catch all the episodes on YouTube. It'll go up on YouTube probably Friday morning. So I encourage you, check it out on YouTube. Check out the other episodes. There's a great library there.
If you don't subscribe to this show on YouTube, you should.
You should. You're right.
Right.
Subscribe to YouTube. You get a notification when it goes up. So thank you for watching. Mike will be back next week, and I hope I will be back next week sitting in that chair. We will find out. Good night, Wallingford. Thank you.